Hey everybody, Evan Lazar alongside Alex Barth, Patriots Beat Live podcast edition. Sorry for the technical delay there, but we're here now. We're going to break down OTAs, Patriots Thursday OTAs. We're open to the media. We can discuss all the different angles that happened out there, maybe get to some other things later on in the show as well. If you guys want to drop any questions or anything like that in the chat, we'll try to answer some things later on in the show as well. But first and foremost, Alex, out at OTAs today, for the first about an hour and 20 minutes was all drills against the air, running routes, throwing passes into trash cans, things like that. Nothing really too competitive or too exciting. Then we get into the first team period of the entire offseason program that we've been able to see. And Cam Newton goes first and Mac Jones goes second, right behind him, followed by Jarrett Stidham and Brian Hoyer. So just your reaction, Alex, to the fact that I think we can safely say, based off of this at least, and maybe this is a little bit too much looking into one practice session and one team period, but based off of what we saw today, Mac Jones is already QB2. Which is a pretty quick ascension there.
Yeah, if you remember what I said on Tuesday, and I wrote this in my OTA preview column on 98.5thesportsub.com as well, I was urging people to not freak out over the order that the quarterbacks threw, right? Yeah. They went in order of seniority last year. Brian Hoyer threw first, even though Cam and Stidham were the two that were viewed competing for the starting job. And I kind of urged everybody to be cautious. If Mac throws last, it is what it is. I said it on the show, and I said it in my column. The only thing we're going to learn about the quarterback position in OTAs is if Mac throws anywhere but last and he threw second. That's huge because Bill Belichick, especially at this time of the year, bases everything on seniority. The rookie, look, the rookies don't even have numbers yet. He's making the rookies earn their numbers, and Mac Jones is throwing ahead of Stidham. That one is what it is. He's throwing ahead of Brian Hoyer, who's been in this league for over a decade. That tells me they're incredibly high on Stidham. It tells me a hell of a lot more than all the people who were bemoaning the subdued draft room reaction when they took him and saying the team wasn't high on Stidham. They have him throwing ahead of a 10-year veteran at the first public practice. They like this kid. They do.
It was pretty funny because he's out there. He's wearing number 50. The jersey's 3 sizes too big for him because it's fit for a linebacker or something like that, right? The jersey's baggy on him. He's wearing these baggy gym shorts. He's got zero swag whatsoever out there. Cam Newton has all this drip, right? He's got the tights on. He looks like a star quarterback in the NFL. Mac Jones comes out in these baggy shirt, baggy shorts. All of a sudden we get into competitive part of practice and he's already quarterback too. And I would have to go back and really think about it and go through all the different training camps and stuff like that. But let alone a quarterback, but just any rookie. I just can't remember the last time that any rookie was already playing this many snaps with some of the first team guys, right? Like as the quarterback too, as the backup, whatever you want to call it. I mean, even a guy like Nikhil Harry or Sony Michel or any of those other players that they've drafted in the first round in the last couple of years since we got on the beat, all those guys still had to earn their keep. And they still had to rise up the depth chart before they finally got onto the field with the starters. Not Mac Jones. He just comes right in and is QB2.
I do want to push back on that a little bit. And Mac Jones didn't earn his way to where he is at on the depth chart.
I'm not saying he didn't earn it. I'm saying that they already like him.
He did it quicker. Right. He did it quicker. They had the off-season Zoom meetings. They had rookie mini camp. This was the third OTA practice. So clearly, I don't think, if we had been there day one of OTAs, is Mac throwing second? I don't know. Was he throwing second for those workouts right ahead of OTAs? I highly doubt it. He's earned this behind the scenes. We have to remember we're coming in partway through the process and witnessing this partway through the process. But yeah, that is an incredibly, incredibly rapid ascension for Mac Jones because, again, normally at this time of year, they base everything on seniority. Mac Jones has thrown no NFL passes. He's taken no NFL snaps. He's played in no NFL games. And they have him ahead of a guy who's played in this league for over a decade in Brian Hoyer. That, to me, says something. It doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be the starter week one. It doesn't even necessarily mean he's a lock to be good. It just means that they believe in this kid. They think he's doing all the right things. They think he's making the progress they need to see where they can put him in a more foundational role.
Right. And the other, just kind of getting into actually what we saw of Mac Jones. Obviously, I think the order and the way he carried himself and the way he was kind of his standing in the pecking order, I think is the most important takeaway, more so than any throw that he actually made, because we're not really into padded practices with live competitive drills yet. And this is more of an education period, as Bill Belichick would call it, right? A teaching and a learning period, not a evaluation period. So he threw 3 passes in 7-on-7s, 2 checkdowns, 1 drop by Christian Wilkerson over the middle. But there was a drill earlier on in practice where they had the offense was going up against a defender, 2 defenders. They were basically a 2-man route combination versus 2 defensive backs. And they were running the same route combination over and over and over again. They weren't changing the route combination, but they were changing the coverage. So the goal was, okay, this time the outside corner is going to sit and the inside defender is going to take the, over the top. Next time they're going to play man-to-man coverage. The next time we're going to flip the zone, right? And we're going to go all these different sort of iterations of coverages and just see, how does the quarterback react? Does he know where his answer is based off the movement of the defense after the snap? And that's where Mac, I thought, made some really quick decisions with the football, sort of just seeing, okay, the corner's sitting, I'm going to throw the seam. Okay, the corner's off, I'm going to throw the hitch, that type of thing. And being able to make those types of quick decisions with the football, I think, was really telling. And then later on in practice, actually after 7-on-7s, they got into setting the mic, protections. And this was a walkthrough, right? The guys on the other side of the football, Shaq Mason was playing 3 technique, right? This was not a competitive live drill. All they were doing is sort of walking through it. And Mac was under center, setting the mic, getting everybody in line, making sure that the blitz was going to get picked up or the pressure scheme was going to get picked up. And then the offensive players playing defense were throwing things at them, right? Okay, and this time we're going to blitz this guy and drop that guy, and vice versa. We're going to stunt or whatever. And Mac got all the ducks in a row, got everything blocked for the most part. I wrote that JJ Taylor actually had a few nice decisions on those that the coaches were pretty highly praising him for. But it just looked to me like they were throwing a whole lot of just information and processing and mental processing type of stuff at Mac today, and not necessarily as much of the, let's say, let's see him make a 30-yard, throw down the field. Let's see him drive the ball down the field. It wasn't so much about that as it was, let's see how much mental acumen this guy has. And I thought that it looked like he passed all the eye tests that we could at least tell from the stands.
Yeah, and you also have the players after Hunter Henry, Kendrick Bourne, talking about his leadership ability.
Right.
Kendrick Bourne said that he didn't expect Mac Jones to have as much swagger as he did.
Yeah.
And look, the baggy jersey and big shorts, that sounds like somebody else we know who maybe didn't,
It's just funny because it felt like the coaching staff and like the equipment staff were just like, you're a rookie, here's some stuff, put it on. You know what I mean? Like, don't come out here with your headband on and all this. No, there's not.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if there's an element of that here.
Yeah.
And it's, part of it, this sounds stupid, but I've heard of coaches doing this in other sports. I don't know if the Patriots have ever done this, but I know a college baseball coach who I've talked to, he would give, when he had his top recruits come in, right, he would give them uniform pants that were 2 sizes too big.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't tell them. He would and if they told him about it, he would say, okay, deal with it. And because he would there's going to be things that affect you that are uncomfortable that you can't handle, whether it's weather or crowd conditions, nagging injuries or whatever. So I don't know, this is kind of the checkers versus chess thing. I don't know that that's what Bill's doing, but I honestly thought of that when I saw Mac Jones in those shorts. Did they give him equipment that they knew was going to be uncomfortable just to see how he handles it and something like that? But yeah, no, you have players, promoting his leadership ability. The big word was energy. And this was Mac and Cam. I feel like every single play when they were talking, saying that the quarterback position was bringing a lot of energy to practice. And that's what you want to see, because those guys are going to drive the tempo. Those guys are going to drive the mood on the field. Those guys are going to keep everybody engaged or lose everybody in the other direction if it's somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. It sounds like both Cam and Mac have this team's attention. They have this team's focus. They are setting a tone for a team that plans to do some damage this year, turn around their struggles from last year. That all business attitude is still here as it was during Brady's era. And that's good to see, because that's one thing you can't scout, right? We could talk about Mac's arm. We could talk about his ability to read the field, his ability to make pre-snap checks. We could talk about that a ton. And, you hear this and that. Players at Alabama, do they like him? Don't they? Whatever. You don't really know how a 22, 23, 24-year-old kid is going to command an NFL offense until you see it. That's a complete and total unknown. And it's very early. It's one practice, but you have to like what you saw from Mac Jones in that regard. And I wrote something about this for 985thesportshub.com today. And in the tweet, I just teased it as Patriots players noticing similarities between Cam Newton and Mac Jones. And everybody instantly, without clicking the link, this is why I always click the link, everybody without clicking the link assumed that was some negative. All the comments were like, oh no, what's wrong with Mac, blah, blah, blah. I understand Patriots fans have some issues with Cam Newton. Some of them are certainly justified. But boy, if I could have my quarterback learn being a leader from anybody, Cam Newton is very high on that list. The way he captivated that team last year, the way he held that locker room, the way guys wanted to go to war for him specifically. You can't teach. You can kind of teach it. You can't really teach it. He had that trait. If Mac has some of that trait as well, and if Cam doing that can kind of rub off on Mac a little bit, that's huge.
Yeah, I do want to talk about Mac Jones as well, because we talked a lot about Cam as well. We talked a lot about Mac. Cam clearly is still the starting quarterback in everybody's eyes, right? He's the guy. We talk about Mac taking the second reps. Cam was the one taking
Bill said he's the starter after the draft.
Right. And Bill said he was the starter after the draft. And today, they did nothing today to dispel that, right? He was the first guy in every single drill. He was the first one up. Now, I think the good news is, from what I saw with Cam, was the arm strength looks like it's very much still there, right? He was zipping the ball around today. He had plenty of zip on his throws in terms of driving the ball down the field. Didn't see a ton of uncorked deep balls from anybody besides Brian Hoyer, which we can get to in a second. But for the most part, it was just, those 10, 12-yard throws.
Well, how did his footwork look? Because he was supposedly focusing on that this offseason. Right.
So I would say, look, I think everything – I think his arm and throwing motion is what I'm trying to say. That looked exactly the same as it always has, right? And we talked to quarterbacks coach Jed Fish. We talked about to Josh McDaniels last year a whole lot about the fact that at this stage of his career, 31, 32 years old, 10 years in the NFL, you're really not going to change the delivery. Right. The way the ball comes out of his hands and the way that his arm moves and stuff like that, that's pretty much set in stone at this point, because he's had so many repetitions of doing it the same way that any chance of kind of training him to do it a different way is probably asking a whole lot of him at this point. Now, the footwork I thought was pretty solid today. And the one thing that I would say is that it does clearly seem like he is trying to throw from a higher release point and keeping himself on the balls of his feet a little bit more and keeping himself upward, taller when he throws the football, and keeping those shoulders parallel, which I think is really important as well when we talk about throwing mechanics. You don't want to have that backwards tilt, right? You want to have those shoulders parallel. You want to step into the throw. You want to be in an athletic position. I think at times last year, Cam did kind of, squat a little bit too much when he was throwing the ball. And that's when he got that really wide base and his footwork sort of got away from him. Today, it seemed like he was at least trying to emphasize the footwork in terms of being a little bit taller, being a little bit more upright as he went through the throwing motion. And I think that that's something that will be beneficial to him in the long term. But with all that said, and I don't want to look too much into one practice or anything like that, but he still had some issues controlling the ball, right? There were still some throws. There was one in 7-on-7s. Matt Lacoste actually had to make a diving catch to make the catch. Cam threw it a little bit wide of him, and he dove and caught it. There was a couple of throws in just, against air where the ball got away from him just a little bit. Maybe the wind was a little bit of a factor on one or two of them. It was a little bit windy when he was throwing at one point. But for the most part, the arm looked live. The arm looked good. I don't think there's any concerns about the shoulder. We're still talking about consistency with accuracy, though, a little bit with Cam.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something, too, that We'll get a better idea of that once they're running full speed, and that won't be until July. But
right,
it's hard to total. I mean, I saw your tweet where Mac has to jump up and get the ball. That was a sick catch, by the way.
Yeah,
that was a really good catch.
To be fair, Cam was kind of goofing around a little bit, not goofing around.
No, I didn't take that throw seriously, but you look at that kind of thing, and after the year he had last year, that's certainly going to garner more attention. But that kind of stuff, you put more stock into it once they're going up against the defense, once they're running 80, 90, 100%. You're just not going to get that in OTAs.
Right. The fastest paced team drill was that 7-on-7 period. And they were probably going maybe 65, 75%, something like that, 3/4 speed maybe. And Cam did probably have the best, I would say, like, in-game throw, like a throw that would actually exist in an actual NFL game. Brian Hoyer's deep ball to Nelson Aguilar, it looked like the corners on that side of the field or the safety on that side of the field kind of fell asleep a little bit. Aguilar got behind him, and Brian Hoyer threw up an arm punt to get it down there to Aguilar, who made a great catch, and we can talk about Aguilar in a second. But the best throw just from hits the top of the drop, makes the right read, gets the ball out, puts it in a good spot, and we move the chains, was a throw to Nelson Aguilar along the sideline from Cam Newton. They dropped it to cover 3. The corners bailed, and he hit him on like a 12-yard comeback route along the sideline. Well, from our vantage point, it looked like Cam kind of was leading him a little bit too far out of the sideline, but Aguilar, I guess the coaches gave it to him, right? They said that he was able to tap the toes in and everything. So that was by far the best out of Mac and Cam. Certainly that was the best downfield throw that we saw out of the two guys. So I don't think Cam did anything today by any means to make me concerned or like on anything we saw last year, which was concerning on itself, obviously, but not, any more concern at all with off from Cam today. So a pretty optimistic day for all the quarterbacks. I mentioned Brian Hoyer had probably the highlight of the day to Nelson Aguilar, and that was sort of the next place I wanted to take it, was speaking about Hunter Henry and Aguilar, and just the fact that it was nice to see two real NFL weapons on the field for the Patriots again, right? Like, we haven't really seen that since probably 2018, I guess, with Edelman and Gronk both out there in training camp. But to see those two guys out there, and it was pretty crystal clear, I would say, especially with Aguilar's speed and then Hunter Henry's just route technique and detail and stuff like that, that those guys were on a different level than the rest of the crew that was out there. And it must be a breath of fresh air for Josh McDaniels to go out there at practice and know that you at least have two guys that are above average, guys that can actually go out there and make some plays.
And they're going to get Jonnu Smith too. He wasn't there today, right?
No, he wasn't there today.
At OTA. So, but it's certainly got to be exciting. And this is kind of what we've talked about. I feel like maybe it's harder for some people to picture in their heads, but you've now seen it on the field. And when training camp comes, people will get to see it on the field that, adding that one superstar receiver, that Julio Jones, would certainly be nice, but they've built up an offense now. They have options, real legitimate options, guys who can get themselves open, guys who can make plays after the catch, guys who can do both at the same time. It's going to look very different. I know people are scared about not having that true number one option because of the hole the Patriots were in last year, but having a bunch of pretty good options is also, that's also certainly a way to work. So it's going to be exciting to kind of see those guys again once they get up to speed, how those pieces start to click.
Yeah, and I think that when you watch Nelson Aguilar in particular, his vertical speed and just his ability to get off the line of scrimmage and get up.
So that's the thing. So everybody talks about his speed. Like, how much does it stand out? I remember last year you telling me Damiere Byrd popped. Did it pop in the same way as Damiere Byrd?
I think more so because with Aguilar, what I see with his speed is a more physical speed. Like, you feel it, right? You feel guys running with him. You feel the fact that he can get open at the top of the route a little bit better than Damiere Byrd as well. And when you watch him run routes, and it's easy in these training camp settings because you can literally just see Aguilar, then Bourne, then Myers, then Harry, then Gunner, and you just go right on down the line, and you kind of see like, okay, what's the difference between a guy with speed like Aguilar has and a guy with speed like Nikhil Harry has, which is not a whole lot of speed, right? And you see those two kind of contrasting each other. And when Aguilar ran routes, you were like, okay, that's a dynamic route runner. That's a guy that can really create separation down the field and move down the field, and that's something that even last year during camp, Damiere Byrd never showed me that. I don't think any of the guys that we saw last year in camp ever showed me that. And then it's almost like I watched Aguilar and I was like, that's what an NFL wide receiver should look like, right? Like that's a guy that's getting paid $11 million to come play wide receiver for the Patriots. That's the way he should move. That's the way he should carry himself. That's the way he should look, just from his body type standpoint. Not so much. I never really saw that with Damiere Byrd, right? Like he was fast and you could tell against air that he could move, but he was not physically fast like Nelson Aguilar is. And that was nice to see.
So how about that whole, you were just saying, like, this is what an NFL wide receiver, this is how he should move, this is how he should catch, this is how he should run. Do you get that from Kendrick Bourne at all?
Not as much. That was the sort of the thing
I didn't think it would be as much because Aguilar's objectively a better player, but where's Kendrick Bourne in comparison to a guy like Nikhil Harry or Jacoby Myers?
I think him and Jacoby move pretty similarly, but I think Bourne looks a little bit better built, I guess I would say, than the guy. Yeah, Jacoby's a little bit slim, right? Kendrick Bourne is built like an NFL wideout. I think he can run a little bit better than maybe a guy like Nikhil Harry, but he's kind of in that Jacoby Myers category. And whenever I see Kendrick Bourne, and this today kind of hammered this home, is like what they thought they were going to get out of Mohamed Sanu is sort of what I think they're going to get out of Kendrick Bourne, is a guy that certainly is not going to win with speed. And these types of passing camp, OTA type stuff, when there's no contact and they're just running routes against air, against light defense, he's not popping. He's not running by anybody, right? It's not super impressive, but the technique, the smarts, sort of the savvy in the middle of the field to get open, the strength at the catch point. I think you could see that all those things are going to be there for him, but no, he's not a flashy OTA type of guy, right? We're not going to write all these things about how great Kendrick Bourne looks in OTAs. I don't expect us to, at least. We didn't see Trey Nixon. He wasn't out there today. He's dealing with I think Mike Reese said it was like a knee issue or something like that. But it wouldn't surprise me if we were almost more impressed with somebody like a Trey Nixon in this type of setting, just because of the speed, than somebody like a Bourne. But I think Bourne is going to be a solid player for them. But I think that there's still a little bit. We got to see it once the pads come on, I think, before we can really get into that one. I do want to talk about Hunter Henry, though, who every single time Hunter Henry ran a route, Nick Caley, the tight ends coach, was like turning to Devin Asiasi and the new guy was Troy Famugala, I think it is, or
Fumagalli.
That
was my guy in the 2018 draft. I was so hyped today. I know he's probably not going to make the team, but in 2018, I remember that's the guy who was pounding the table for it. 9-finger Troy.
Yeah, so Troy was out there today. Devin Asiasi, Matt Lacoste were out there today. And every single time Hunter Henry ran a route, Nick Caley was just like, that's how you do it. You see how he ran? You see how he did that? Dude, just do that. Like, just copy that, right? And even against air, even against like light defense, even against coaches, Troy Brown's playing cornerback on him or something like that, right? Like, just the way that he moves, the attention to the detail, the moves at the top of the route, the eye discipline to kind of, show fakes and then move up the field. He ran one route, a stick nod, where he just is going to fake the stick route and then break up the seam. And he just like ran it perfectly. Like, you could put that on the teach tape for a young wide, high school wide tight ends, can watch that route and learn something from it. And it was both Josh McDaniels and Nick Caley was like, see how he just did that, guys? Just do it just like Hunter just did it. And that to see that sort of level of professionalism out of a tight end, like I said about Aguilar, like we haven't really seen that since like Edelman and Gronk and those guys. It's the same thing with Hunter Henry. Like last year, those tight ends in camp just don't even hold a candle to what we just saw in one practice out there, from the way Hunter Henry moves, from the way he carries himself. They were doing that drill. They were just having some fun and trying to throw a football into a trash can down the field, and all the quarterbacks are going through. And next thing you know, Hunter Henry's got the ball in his hand and he's trying to throw. I think Devin Asiasi is jumping in line and trying to throw a ball in the trash can. Hell no. Right. Like that's like this is our $12 million tight end. He can have some fun, during OTAs, that's definitely what the sense that you got out of Hunter Henry was. This was easy for him. This was riding a bike. He was walking in the park today.
And that's what you want to see from these guys. I mean, he said after practice that, he loves this time of year because everything's just kind of slowed down. Yeah. And it's not as intense. And sometimes you need that, right? This is playing for the Patriots is going to be an intense experience. It's an intense environment, but it can be tough to learn like that. So to show up now and kind of be able to take things at his own pace to start and keep things light, for when everything really hits the fan come late July in training camp, I think that's a good thing to see. I think having that mentality is good. And there was always this worry, I think, and maybe it's not as bad with Belichick staying, but I think I was worried when Brady and Belichick left, like how much would the culture change? And obviously Belichick's still here, but it doesn't feel super different. It doesn't feel like the foot's come off the pedal at all. So, guys like that, a guy like Hunter Henry who signs that big deal and still comes in and is going to OTAs, something like that, I think is certain, Cam showing up at OTAs. That's certainly encouraging that these veterans are showing up for those roles.
Yeah, I think the 4 quarterbacks all showing up for OTAs was a really good message sent to the rest of the team, that this year is going to be different, that Cam was taking this year very seriously. Coach Belichick said this morning that Cam's been there since the jump. Like he's been there since the very beginning, and he's been a participant in the entire offseason program. So I think that he knew, and Cam talked about it so much over the offseason when he did those like sit down interviews and stuff like that, or the thing with the whatever it was called with all the former NFL players where they all sat in a circle and talked about their experiences and stuff like that. And he said, like, I never knew how important OTAs were until last year. And I never knew how important all that summer stuff was. And to see him there now, I think really does bode well for the rest of the year, even though there were some big glaring absences, right? Devin McCourty's not there. Stephon Gilmore's not there. Dante Hightower wasn't there. Judon and Johnny Smith weren't there. JC Jackson wasn't there. But at the same time, 62 players showed up. That's a pretty good turnout. A lot of those guys were veteran players. Obviously, it's a very veteran-heavy team, and a lot of those guys were there as well. So it felt like a good showing, and it felt like a pretty good group of people that ended up showing up. We can talk a quick minute about your boy Gunnar Olszewski and Jake Bailey. Bailey is like he puts on a show. I mean, you've seen it.
You didn't stop watch him though. I'm a little disappointed.
I didn't stop watching him. I'll try to do that in minicamp. But I mean, he's out there and like you lose sight of the ball in the sun. Gunnar muffed one and he pointed up to the sun and he was like, you kicked it so damn high that I couldn't see the ball coming down. This guy just booms it. It's crazy. Like, it's just crazy to see that kind of foot up close and, that close. Like you see it from the press box, you see it from the stands, you see it on TV, but when you really get to see it as close as you do in like a camp setting, it's just an absolute boomer of a leg. I mean, it's really impressive. He puts on a clinic every single time he punts the ball in practice.
Yeah, and you weren't excited when they took him. I'm just pointing that out.
I wasn't.
We were working together. Oh, Alex can do the thread on that one. Blah blah blah. No, he's going to play a key role this year. He really is. And with that defense they have, the more aggressive those guys can be, the better that defensive unit is going to be. And the defense can be more aggressive. They have more field behind them, and that's on Jake Bailey, and that's all field position. So I've said it before. I've said it a million times. I'll say it again. The best weapon for a defense can be a good punter, and Jake Bailey's a good punter. So I'm excited to see how that all comes together. Complementary football.
Yeah, Gunnar was out there doing his punt return thing as well. There's no contact, so he's just bobbing and weaving through guys. But I thought him and Nikhil Harry, unfortunately, I thought looked pretty much the same as receivers. I didn't really see any big jump for those guys. I thought I saw a little bit of a jump for Gunnar last year as a receiver in terms of the explosiveness and the quickness and stuff like that. So I don't know if there's another. I think there's a comfortability gear still there for Gunner as a receiver, right? Just kind of understanding the feel for the position, I think can improve for him. But in terms of his movement skills, I think he's kind of is where he is at this point. And we see it on punt returns. I mean, he can certainly, he's explosive, right? He can certainly move on an NFL field. So it's really just more getting comfortable with doing it as a receiver versus as a punt returner. That's sort of the next step for him. So I don't know if he's necessarily moving any faster than he was last year. Same with Nikhil, kind of the same thing as last year as well. We didn't.
Well, how about Jacoby?
Jacoby, last year in camp, Jacoby did absolutely nothing, right? He was hurt for a while. He was wearing the red non-contact jersey for a while. That's a lot of the reason why he had a slow start to the season and didn't get in there until that San Francisco game, really, was because of all those factors. He was comfortably in the top 3 wideouts, right? Aguilar, Bourne, Jacoby. That was the group, and it was pretty obvious that was the group that Josh McDaniels is counting on. He's hoping that he can lean on those 3 guys at that position this year. And Jacoby looked like Jacoby of last year, towards the end of last year, playing as everything that we saw at that point. I didn't see anything today that said, he's taking a step back or anything like that. And I think it was pretty crystal clear. They broke the huddle a couple of times with Aguilar, Bourne, Myers, Hunter Henry. And you're like, okay, well, this is John is going to be in there, obviously, and that's going to be a factor. But other than that's going to be the group, right? Those 5 guys, if you put Johnny in there as well, is kind of going to be the group that they count on in terms of catching passes. And that was the group that was out there today. In terms of defense, it's tough to evaluate defense if you can't hit anybody. So that's a tough one. Juwan Williams did have a nice pass breakup to end 7-on-7.
So did he work, because we talked about this on Tuesday, did he work more as a corner or a safety?
Mostly as a corner on the outside in the practices we saw. They were using Kyle Duggar and Jalen Mills a ton at safety because Devin McCourty's not there. So those 2 guys are getting a ton of run at both safety spots right now, kind of just interchangeable back there and sort of learning both kind of points of view in terms of the offense or in terms of the defense, excuse me. So that was good to see. It was Mills, playing a little post safety, playing a little too deep with Kyle Duggar, then both of them rotating from low to high and stuff like that. Juwan Williams played mostly outside corner. Now they don't have a ton of outside corners in camp now.
He's the 3rd outside corner on the roster, and
he's the top outside corner. No, JC wasn't there today.
Okay.
So a couple of guys were there earlier in the week, Trey Nixon, JC, that weren't there today. So maybe they tweaked something or something like that led to them sitting out today.
Right. Okay. So just the reason I'm wondering, because again, we talked about this on Tuesday, that 3rd corner role is huge, especially with us not knowing what's going to happen with Stephon Gilmore. So, Juwan Williams hasn't had a ton of run in the NFL. He's kind of been behind J.C. Jackson and Stephon Gilmore for most of his career. So I think, especially because when he has played, it's somewhat been at safety. I think these reps are immensely important for him and for the team. So that's good to hear that he's playing outside corner and he's playing well because they're going to need that.
Yeah, he looked like he was holding his own, like he kind of always does. Like I never really think that Juwan Williams looks like he's swimming in it or is like
he's not a bad player. Again, it's just the 2 guys he's behind. It's tough.
Yeah, it's very tough, and that's why I always say that I'm not giving up on Juwan Williams quite yet, because whenever we see him at camp, whenever we see him in a preseason game, or he gets in at the end of a game or something like that, I don't know. My throat, of course, is not getting hot. Yes. It never looks like he's overwhelmed. You know what I mean? Like it never looks like he's getting blown away by the talent or anything like that, or getting run by or anything really. There's a couple of times when he got run by like Demir Bird or Philip Dorsett or something like that. But it's like you have a 6'4" corner, on a 5'9" burner. Like obviously he's going to have some tough time keeping up with Philip Dorsett on a go ball, right? But when he's in the right matchup and he's playing the right techniques, I think he can hold his own. So I'm not completely giving up on him either.
Yeah, I mean, you can't right now because I don't know that there's any other options, right? But he's a guy.
That's a good girlfriend for you, bringing me some water so I can get this.
I mean, I guess how bad was the pollen out there? Because it's been bad for me. And so, like, in case people don't know, because of COVID, it's limited how many people can go. So Evan was there today. I wasn't, but yeah,
it was hot. It wasn't my allergies were all right, but it was hot. It was 85 and sunny. And where you're out there in those metal bleachers, right? So I feel like they do this to the media for our brains like get foggy or something like that, and we like kind of.
I'd so much rather be out there on a day like that than what are you gonna do in the pouring rain? You can't see anything.
Yeah,
I'd so much rather be out there on a day like that. That's like the ideal day.
It was a tall drink of water out there today. It's 80 and sunny. You got football players playing football again. It was great. It felt like normal, it felt like another taste of normalcy. But I think that look, I don't want to go all in on all these. Like, I'm not going to tell you what Will Sherman looked like. I'm not going to we don't know that yet. Right?
So let me ask you this. Like, did he, I'll go back to what we talked about Tuesday. Where was he working? Regardless of how he looked, was he playing tackle? Was he playing guard? Did he take any snaps at center, which he's been working on? Did he do any of that?
So there was some guard and tackle for Will Sherman. He was doing a little bit of both. Onwenu was also doing a little bit of both, which is what he told us the other day, so that stayed consistent with that. So there was a lot of shuffling on the offensive line. Ted Karras was repping at guard, which doesn't surprise anybody because Andrews was playing center.
Right.
So, there was, besides Karras and Andrews were center left guard for a lot of the drills when they were out there together. So that was pretty consistently that group, but they had Sherman, they had Onwenu, they had a lot of different guys rotating. Corey Cunningham played some snaps at tackle, which is something that's going to keep happening.
Wynn and Brown were both not there.
Correct. Right? Yes.
Okay, so
I don't expect to see Trent Brown. The OTAs isn't Trent Brown's shtick. You know what I mean? Like he'll be here July 31st, right? Or in June for mini camp. I don't think he's going to come out for these voluntary things. But Isaiah Wynn wasn't there either. And so it was really at tackle. It was Karan, Onwenu, Cunningham. Those three guys were getting a ton of work.
In Sherman
at tackle. Sherman a little bit, but I would say he was more repping at guard.
That's interesting.
If you have to say the majority, of his snaps, I would say it was more at guard than tackle.
See, that's interesting to me because he was a tackle in college. And I wonder if they're just trying to get him more work at guard to truly turn him into a 4-spot player. Because like I said on Tuesday, I think if you're comfortable with him in 4 spots, right? So teams generally keep 9 offensive linemen, 9 to 10 offensive linemen, right? You're starting 5, 1 backup tackle, that's 6, 1 backup interior lineman, that's 7, and then 1 backup center is 8, and then sometimes you have a floater. If Sherman can be both the 3rd string guard behind Karras and the backup tackle, that just eliminates a lineman you have to carry. And because it's going to be, I'm trying to do the math in my head, so I apologize if I butchered that, but you get the idea, right?
Right.
If he can, you normally have a backup guard and a backup tackle. If Sherman can be both, that's 1 less guy you have to keep on the roster, and it's 1 more roster spot you have for a wide receiver, for a running back, for a linebacker, where they'll certainly need the roster spots. So that's why it's a big development to me. Like, we'll see how he looks. The reason I asked you where he was playing, because, it ultimately comes down to how does he play at guard to make that happen. Yeah. I don't want to make that judgment off 1 practice. That's not fair, especially in non-contact practice for linemen. But the fact that he's getting significant work at guard tells me that is the plan. That's probably the plan they're working towards, the path they're working on with him, of turning him into a 4-spot player or a 5-spot player.
Yeah. And that now's the time of year to do all that kind of stuff, right? This is where you rep everywhere and you cross train and you do all that kind of stuff. So definitely a lot of that going on with the offensive lineman. David Andrews, the only center, no guard or tackle for David Andrews, right? He's staying place and staying put in one place. Other than the guys that were out there in terms of the players, I did want to bring up first Ernie Adams, just out of the corner of our eye towards the end of practice. All of a sudden he comes sauntering out onto the field, and I'm just looking around like, is that Ernie Adams? Like, what is he doing here? Like, a week ago he was retired. Now is he unretired again? So like Ernie Adams releases that statement to Mike Reese saying that he's going to be a fan, right? He's done, his work is done, and he's going to go be a fan. And turns out he's back at practice. Like the first time that we get to see practice, Ernie Adams is back out there with the towel wrapped around his head and the arms folded and everything, just like nothing changed.
I mean, how many fans would love to be there? He's just the only Patriots fan that has that access.
Right.
No, I mean, we've seen this before where people from the Patriots retire, but they don't retire. The big one, right? Dante Scarnecchia has still been involved. He still talks to a lot of these linemen. Even some of the players, like Troy Brown, I know he's officially a coach now, but there was two, 3 years there where he wasn't, officially
he wasn't
on the website or anything, but he was just there at practice every day. I think Deion Branch did that at one point, right? Where he would just show up at practice and work with players without an official role. This is what they do. They keep it in the family. They keep people around. It's a place people want to be. So I had a little smile when I saw Ernie was back. Pink stripes forever.
Yeah, pink stripes forever. And he's not a type of guy either. Like, I obviously don't know Ernie Adams personally, but I don't get the sense that Ernie Adams is the type of guy that just can quit like cold turkey in terms of working in football, right? Like when you're that neck deep in something, like it's pretty hard to just rip the Band-Aid off.
So long.
Right. So it kind of seems like he came out at the end of practice more. He came out around the same time that Robert Kraft came out as well to just kind of check in and see how things were going and get a view of the team and stuff like that. So it was definitely not, he wasn't there fully evaluating, although he was standing there with his arms crossed staring at the field of play. So it was classic Ernie. The other thing that was very, very interesting, especially off the heels of Bill Belichick's press conference this morning when he was asked about Matt Patricia, for the first 35 minutes of practice, Bill and Matt Patricia were standing next to each other chatting about something for about 30 minutes. And it was really interesting to see because he's kind of like his confidant, like his consigliere, right? He's wherever I kind of point you go sort of thing, right? And he kind of has that trust because of his experience, because of his experience in the system with the Patriots to sort of allow Matty P to just sort of be around and just do different things for them. I found it very interesting how close by Matty P seemed to be to Bill pretty much the entire practice.
Well, he's the new Ernie Adams, right? That's what people speculated, and that was kind of Ernie's role, just standing next to Bill and never, from what we've seen from Mic'd Up, and I'm sure that's just scraping the surface, but it wasn't always necessarily, heavy football talk. It was just bouncing ideas off each other. So I'm sure Patricia's a guy Bill feels like he can do that with. And yeah, it'd be really interesting to be a fly on the wall for that conversation, certainly.
Yeah, it definitely caught my eye, and just two guys standing kind of in the corner of the practice field, and you're like, that's Matt Patricia right there next to the head coach, getting his brain picked about some drill they're probably doing or something like that, and that was pretty interesting as well. There's still a lot of questions, obviously, in the chat. I saw some Trey Nixon request. Trey Nixon was not at practice today. He's dealing with an injury, so we didn't get to see him. Yodny Kajust is still kind of a ghost. Like he was there, but I didn't actually see him do anything. I don't think. I gotta next week if we get to go back. I'll have to be more careful about looking for that and seeing if Kajust is doing anything. But we did attendance, and he was one that we checked off, so he was physically out there, but there's not
the man, the myth, the legend.
It's crazy. He's literally a ghost. Didn't see much out of any of the linemen, quite frankly. They're barely going full half speed at this point. This is all just mental reps for them, so it's kind of hard to gauge anything from any of those guys. Nikhil Harry, in terms of improvement from him, I mentioned this briefly. I didn't see anything different from what we saw last year with him in terms of how fast he was moving, in terms of his foot speed or agility or change of direction. And look, he's a big guy who's got heavy feet. I think that's really how it's going to be. I don't think that in year 3 or year 4, Nikhil Harry is all of a sudden going to change into, Devontae Adams or Julio Jones or something like that overnight. I think it's pretty clear that he's sort of he is who he is. right? And maybe they can get the best out of him by using him correctly, going into this season as sort of a downfield jump ball, red zone type of receiver instead of trying to let him run with the football, try to get him the ball down the field a little bit more. And of course, Alex, the questions pouring in about Julio Jones. And if the Patriots
before we get to that, there was one other question because somebody asked, and I wanted to touch on it, and they brought up Ramondre Stevenson.
Yes.
And he was a guy I was a little surprised wasn't there. I don't know if I missed something and he wasn't there because of injury. I apologize.
Right.
But I said on Tuesday, he's a guy I think, even though he's a rookie running back with the Patriots and they don't generally play these guys, I think there's a role for him to win. I do. I think Rex Burkhead's old spot, he'd be perfect fit for that. So I was a little surprised to see he didn't take part today. If it was because of injury, obviously that's unfortunate, and you hope he gets healthy. I think we did see he was there early in the week, so I don't want to totally put the kid on blast. This isn't to knock him or anything like that, but just in terms of players we're looking forward to seeing, I think my two I gave at the end of last show were Donta Hightower, who wasn't there. He just got married a couple days ago, and congratulations to him, obviously. And then Ramondre Stevenson, who wasn't there either. So
we were all surprised to not see Ramondre Stevenson. Christian Barmore hasn't been out there either. So there's a couple of rookies that have sort of been missing. Trey Nixon, I mentioned, was not there too. I was really surprised to see Ramondre Stevenson absent as well. So maybe it is an injury or something's going on with him. Though there was only two running backs at practice today. JJ Taylor and Tyler Gaffney were the only two running backs on the field. So that was interesting.
Kind of tells you why they signed Tyler Gaffney.
They signed Tyler Gaffney because they literally needed him to run practice. That's what I'm saying. That was literally it. He's not going to make the team, and he's literally here because they knew going into these OTAs that they only had one, maybe two running backs that they were going to be able to have out there. So JJ Taylor and Tyler Gaffney got a whole lot of run out there today, and I thought Taylor looked decent. There was one throw along the sideline. He ran a wheel route along the sideline, laid out for it. He just missed it. But he's a small guy, so to see him stretch out like that and come close to catching it was pretty impressive in itself. There's some questions about Quinn Norton, the rookie kicker, the only undrafted rookie on the Patriots roster right now, if I am not mistaken.
Yeah, no, you're right.
He's got a leg. I'll give him that.
I would hope he has two.
I don't know if how accurate it's going to be, right? And that was sort of the question mark, I believe. Kicker's better than me, Alex, but I think that was the question mark coming in. But he definitely has a boot. He can kick the ball far. Whether that kind of comes to fruition in terms of accuracy, Justin Rohrwasser kicked the ball far. So,
wait, how about Aguayo? How did Aguayo look?
Aguayo, was pretty quiet throughout camp, or throughout practice today, I should say. Not a ton of kicks for him that I can remember. Norton was kicking. They had a period that was sort of an in-between type period. It was when the quarterbacks were doing the trash can thing. And there was the other field, there was punt return going on. So the backup long snapper and Quinn Norton, those guys were kind of working out on the field by themselves. And that's when I saw Norton kick. And he drilled a couple that looked pretty impressive. I didn't see Aguayo kick very much. I think he kicked once or twice, and I think he made both of them, but they were from 39, 40 kind of extra points. So nothing too fancy to say about him.
So I'll say this with the kickers. If you want to know what to look for in a kicker, and there's a number of things, but here's the one basic kind of thing that applies to all kickers. How often do they repeat their motion? How consistent is their kicking motion? That's what you want to look for. And it really comes down to details, because some guys they'll bend their arm a little bit. Some guys have a straight arm. Some guys the shoulders in, some guys the shoulders back. You pick up on the little things. What angle do they plant their foot at? How far back do they bring their leg on the wind up? How do they rotate their hips? You just look at all the little elements of what they're doing. And then when you watch 10 kicks, how many of those things do they do on all 10 kicks? Right. That's where accuracy comes from. Power is power. You don't really need to scout that. You just kind of know, like you said, you can tell the guy can kick the ball far. Most guys by this point have the leg to, in theory, hit a 50, 55 yard field goal. The question is, can they do it with any consistency? Because the harder you kick, the more you're jarring your body, and it's like a golf swing, right? The harder you swing, the more likely your swing is to fall apart. For all of us who played golf, it might just as an analogy here. So when you look at kickers, it's the same thing. It's all right, as he swings harder and the more times he kicks, how much does his motion change, or can he keep it consistent? Can you do the same motion over and over and over again? I know of scouts who will literally scout kickers they take 10 kicks all from the same camera angle and they'll overlay them and literally watch them all on top of each other to see how much it lines up. So that's when you look for a kicker, that's what you look for. But if it, like you said, Norton only kicked a couple times, Aguilar only kicked a couple times.
Yeah,
it can be hard to get the picture from that.
Yeah, there was no field goal, period today where they were kicking field goals quite yet. Nick Folk wasn't there, so we're not quite there yet with the kickers. They did. I don't know if they did this last year, and I just forgot. But they did change the fields, so the fields are now.
Yeah, I wasn't there.
They
did that 2 years ago.
Okay, so maybe I just forgot last year that it was like that as well. I remember them being up and down.
Well, because you know what, last year, because they do them that way for at least 2018 and 19 when I was there. It was the long way. They went across for OTAs and then up and down for training camp. So there were no OTAs last year, so you wouldn't have had that layout last year.
Right. So yeah, they did they're across right now. That stinks. Forever has to paint the lines that they have to flip the fields.
I would love that job. I feel like that'd be great. Go out, paint the field, groundskeeping. I mean, I've done groundskeeping for baseball. It's a ton of fun.
Okay. All right. I'll take your word for it. That seems like a sunburn and a long day to me, but I'll take your word for it that it's fun. Should we end it on Julio?
Yeah. Do you want to just take Julio and maybe hear their questions? We want to do another Boston sports minute like we did.
We can do that. We got in a couple more minutes, but here's our first question on Julio. A percentage chance that Julio Jones is traded to the New England Patriots. Benjamin Albright tweeted right before we started this show that it's in play, and I trust Albright. I think he's got some good birdies out there, so I think it's at least in play. Do I think it's more than 50% chance? No, I would say maybe I'll put it at 33.3%.
See, so I was going to go as high as 40. I think if you asked me to pick the Patriots or the field, I'd pick the field. Yeah. I think there's a better chance he gets traded to a non-New England team than New England. Yeah. But like if I'm setting odds in Vegas with Diana Rossini's report today that the Titans are a long shot, the Patriots are my favorite. So that's what it comes down to. Like, I think he's getting traded. I think that's a foregone conclusion. I don't know that anybody outside of maybe some really unrealistic Falcons fans disagree at this point with that.
Oh yeah. No,
I think he's getting traded. I think the Patriots are the favorite, but I think it's close, and I think that there's more teams involved probably than we know. So, yeah, I'm probably like 35-40, somewhere in there. I'd pick the field up against the Patriots if I had a bet. Is it any of the 30 other teams of the Patriots? I'd say it's one of the 30 teams. But I think if you're going on an individual team basis, the Patriots, in my mind, have the most to gain from it. If the Titans are out, and I don't think the Packers are realistic, I think the Patriots have the most to gain in that case. And I don't think Atlanta wants to send him to the NFC. And a lot of the other realistic teams are in the NFC. Now, I think the Colts, I think the Chargers are certainly threats. Those would probably be
the Colts
2 and 3 for me.
The Colts have the tough thing to overcome of the Wentz trade, right? They traded a bunch of picks for Carson Wentz. So I think that they traded maybe it was a conditional third or something like that in the first, right? For Carson Wentz was the deal.
So there's that pick that's a second, but could turn into a first, but it's going to be a first. Like things would have to go monumentally wrong.
They can't trade the first because if it turns into a first, then they don't have a first. So I'm pretty sure that they're caught there. Now, the report out there that there's a first round pick on the table for Julio kind of brings us into the next question. I was just gonna propose this.
Somebody brought it up in the chat. We can do this first because it still applies.
Right. So what's the highest that you would give up for Julio Jones? What's the most you'd give up for Julio Jones? The package that I continuously hear for Julio is like a second, a fifth, and Sony Michel. Right. A second, a fifth, and Nikhil Harry. Something that's 2 decent picks and a player that's an NFL rosterable player, right? We're not trading him, a superstar. We're not trading him, Stephon Gilmore for Julio Jones, but you're trading something that a guy that they are going to roster in 2021.
Right. Yeah. I'm probably second, fifth in a player. I might even go second, fourth in a player.
Yeah.
If I'm the Patriots. So this is kind of what I wanted to say before. Some of it depends on the team, and somebody brought this up in the chat. The sleeper for me here is the Kansas City Chiefs. They would need to do some cap gymnastics, but they've been doing. I mean, they had no cap space one day, and the next day they paid Joe Thuney $80 million.
Right.
They'll figure it out. And those the biggest jump in the NFL draft from pick to pick is pick 1 to 2, because at pick 1 you can draft anybody you want. The second biggest jump, honestly, for me, it's not 2 to 3. The second biggest jump is 32 to 33, because there's so much value with that 5th-year option and that extra year of team control. So if I'm the Patriots and I know I'm going to need a cornerback, or I'm going to need a tackler, I'm going to need one of these high-paid positions in the next couple of years, I'm really hesitant to trade my first-round pick. Now, a team like the Kansas City Chiefs, they're okay. They're okay. Parting with the 29, 30, 31st pick in the draft isn't that big of a deal. There's only 3 teams realistically, I think, that could make that move. Tampa, and if they do it, don't even play the season. They don't need to. There's no reason for Tampa to make that trade. I don't even think they have maneuverable cap space. That's not going to happen. The Packers are probably on the outside looking in, but again, I look at their cap space. Unless they're going to move Rodgers and get Julio as a weapon for Jordan Love, I don't see it happening. The Chiefs, I think, could move it around a little bit easier because they have guys where they can move money around, and they have a little more long-term security than a team like the Packers does. The Chiefs can move a first. That's who I think that report was today. That's my sleeper team in all of this. So to go back to the question that's on the screen right now, if I'm the Patriots, second, fourth in a player, or like second, fourth, and a seventh. I'd even do a pick swap thing where it's like a second, fourth, and a sixth, and then you get Julio and a seventh back, something like that. You can get creative there.
That's sort of what I feel like Bill Belichick would want to do, is like make
he's going to want to figure out a way, where a pick comes back and there's a pick swap involved. But I think there are teams that are in position to offer more than the Patriots, and the Chiefs are one of them.
Kansas City has about a little bit over $7 million in cap space right now. So they would need Julio to agree to a restructure of the contract. They could convert salary to signing bonus. They could rip up his deal and make a new one. There's ways to circumvent that number.
So the other thing to remember here is if you're giving up a first, you just have inherently such a better offer that, there's been talk of the Falcons agreeing to eat money.
Yeah.
If they get the right offer. If you're Kansas City, you say, hey, we're the only team offering you a first round pick. The only way we're going to do that is if you eat some of the money. You can free up cap space by just never having that cap space hit you, by figuring out a way to keep. You're not going to be able to do all of it, but keeps any little bit that you can keep in Atlanta to begin with certainly helps.
Sort of like an NBA trade, right? Where in the NBA,
this is an NBA trade.
Yeah. Another team kind of, the team trading the player pays a little bit of the player's salary, so that it makes it. Baseball, they do it all the time too, where one team's paying half the guy's salary for the rest of the year or something like that. So that they could get creative like that to get him to Kansas City. I could see that. I could see the Chargers. Look, but from what I saw today from the Patriots, and I'm already in on Julio. Like, I already think it's a great idea for the Patriots. The fact that Mac Jones has made such a quick impression and has already risen up to QB2 and all that kind of stuff, you put Julio out there with Aguilar and Hunter Henry and Johnny when he eventually gets in here and all these guys, and you just make the job on Mac Jones so much easier, right? And we talked about how all these great guys he's throwing to in college, and Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle, and he's got all this talent around him. Well, when Mac Jones had that talent around him, he won a national championship and threw 40 touchdowns and had all these great stats and was a Heisman Trophy finalist. So I'm not saying he's going to be an MVP finalist if you get Julio Jones in here or anything crazy like that. But
Rookie of the Year finalist?
If he could do that with what he had at Alabama, and he's got great supporting cast here in New England, then why can't he be a really good player for the Patriots right away? Right? It's that's sort of the argument against Mac, is his physical talent and the fact that he's throwing to a bunch of number one, first round draft picks at wide receiver. Well, Julio's a first round draft pick. So, there you go. Right. So
all the people who want to compare him to Greg McElroy or AJ McCarron.
Right.
Who do you think those guys were throwing to? It was literally Julio Jones.
Right.
I don't know that Greg McElroy threw to Julio Jones. I think that was McCarron.
So that's our 10 minutes on Julio Jones that we have to do until June 2nd when he's traded. Hopefully, there's a chance that we might find out that this deal is done in principle before that June 2nd date kicks in, but that will be the day that it officially gets underway because of the cap implications there. A couple of other questions here. The Dante Hightower question continues to come up.
Hang on. By the way, it was Greg McElroy throwing to Julio Jones. They were both the same year. I don't know how I pulled that out of my ass. I could have sworn it was McCarron, but okay. Anyway, I was proud of myself for that.
So here's a Hightower question. We did get a kind of an answer from Bill Belichick on this morning, I would say, Alex, with Dante Hightower saying that he expects everybody that's currently on the 90-man roster to play this season. He doesn't expect anybody to retire at this point. So I think it's safe to say the head coach, unless he was lying, which I don't think he necessarily was, would be surprised if Dante Hightower retires at this point.
Well, he did throw in that whole kind of, things change. That's life. Yeah. So that stung me a little bit. But, I'm not putting any stock in Hightower not being there again. He just got married. Shout out, by the way, to him and Aaron Rodgers for figuring out to plan their weddings around OTAs or their honeymoons around OTAs. So they have a legitimate excuse not to go. Love it. Total power move.
Didn't know Aaron Rodgers and Miles Teller were good friends. And I learned that this week.
I would watch that Project X sequel. Because Miles Teller, people forget Miles, the most of all the ridiculous things that happen in Project X. And by the way, if you've never seen it, great movie.
Now we're talking
I want to throw this out there because this is a take I feel strongly about.
With Dante Hightower on the screen as we're talking, retiring it as we're talking about Project X.
I made a connect of all. You can take it down if you want. Of all the ridiculous things that happen in the movie Project X. The most ridiculous part of that movie is Miles Teller playing a character named Miles Teller.
He just randomly appears in that movie, and all of a sudden he's like dancing at the party, and you're just like, what is Miles Teller doing in this scene right now? He plays
a guy named Miles Teller. Like the writers at what point they come up with all these creative things about the party, and then they're just like, what should we name Miles Teller's character? Oh no, Miles Teller. And they're just like, nobody asked any questions about it. It just happened.
So apparently someone in the chat is saying that Miles Teller is really good friends with Shailene Woodley.
I buy that. I don't know a ton about, like, I'm not a big Hollywood guy. I'm not big into
this crew of people, but I don't know. That's interesting. The more you know. All right. Yeah. I think we can wrap it up there on that Project X, Aaron Rodgers, Miles Teller.
Are we doing a quick Boston Sports Minute?
Let's do. What do you think about the Islanders? You worried? You scared?
Yeah, I am. I think they're a good team. I think they're a well-rounded team. They've got a little bit of that Team of Destiny vibe. That building was absolutely rocking last night. That was pretty cool to see objectively. Bruins are going to need a hell of a series. They completely shut down Crosby. The Islanders did. I assume they're going to come. Great defensive team, great defensive coach. They're going to come ready for the perfection line. They're going to need a big series from Tuukka. They're going to need a big series from the defense, and they're going to need a big series from their depth players.
Matthew Barzal scares me.
Absolutely.
That guy's fast. He's good with the puck. He's a scary guy to go up against. But I agree. I agree with Leon here. Bruins in 6. That's my prediction. Oh no, feels like that was the wrong one. There we go.
This feels like a 7-game series to me. I'll go Bruins in 7. How do you feel about Franchi getting sent down? It was not for Jared Duran. It's not for Jared.
I don't love that. But I just 3-1 Habs against the Leafs. If anybody cares. Bruins in 6. That's all I'm saying. Franchi Cordero, I didn't want to see any more Franchi Cordero. I honestly thought that it was just crazy. Like even watching him fielding or like throwing a football back into the infield or anything like that was just anything to do with baseball with Franchi Cordero was a struggle for the last 3 months or whatever it's been. So I'm glad that guy is no longer in the Red Sox outfield. Bring on Duran. We are waiting for Jaron Duran. Thank you.
I love the guy so much. Just learn his name.
I just know his last name. Yeah, it's easy enough. I'm waiting for Duran. There's no reason to wait any longer. I know that they're going to sit there and sell us on a bag of goods about how he needs to work on his fielding or his base running or something lame like that. Bring up the kid. Guy hits nothing but dingers. Let's go. Let's stop messing around.
You might want to jump into the Jaron Duran discourse on Twitter, because it might get you and me too ready for the inevitable Mac Jones discourse, because I think there's going to be some similar conversations there. I was doing it last night. There was nothing to do. That concocted a 3-hour rain delay where it was still pouring when they picked up after. It was ridiculous. Celtics win. The Celtics win a game?
No.
Yeah, I agree.
Swept. And also, this is what I was trying to say earlier about Aaron Rodgers and Miles Teller, and I agree 100%. That group's a red flag to me.
Wow.
All right, it just is, and I think I think the whole group is a red flag.
How?
I think it's a bad influence. I wouldn't want Tom Brady when he was on the Patriots hanging out with Miles Teller and his wife and actresses and stuff like. No,
he dated an actress.
Yeah, it didn't go well.
I don't know. I don't know that much about Shailene Woodley or Miles.
I don't know anything about them. I'm not.
So how do you say they're a bad influence, or you just don't like him hanging out with Hollywood people in general?
Yeah, I just feel like that, like those types of people, you don't want your.
Well, if he's going to go be on TV and host Jeopardy, he needs to get to know the entertainment types.
I'm just saying that if I'm a Packer fan, no, I don't even care that he's not at OTAs. He's the MVP of the league. He doesn't need to come to OTAs, right? I don't even care about that. What I care about is. Well,
I forgot Tom Brady dated Tara Reid.
That's I knew you were talking about Bridget Moynihan, but I was,
but that's a good pull.
Yeah, I don't know. I just
American Pie, great movie.
Tom Brady Sr. is the one that broke that one up, I believe.
Yeah, that's probably smart. But yeah. I don't. Aaron Rodgers wants to be on TV. He should hang out with the entertainment people. That's what he should be doing.
I don't know.
If you're a Packers fan,
I don't like it.
I'll say this. If you're a Packers fan and you were fine with everything up until now, and this is where you're starting to worry, what have you been watching for the last 2 months? What were you watching on draft night? If this is where you're like, oh, you know what? Maybe things aren't going good. Yeah, no, duh. It's been trending that way. I don't look at this and be like, this is the last straw. This is the red flag. This is like, he's been heading this way. Right. Like, oh, yeah, I was fine when, he walked off the field and let the team kick that field goal. I was fine when he demanded a trade on draft night, but he's on a honeymoon in Hawaii with an actor and an actress.
It's not about the honeymoon. It's about Miles Teller. All right. Like, I don't know. It rubs me the wrong way. That's all I can say. I have no reason. I have absolutely no reason to think that. I'm going off of absolutely nothing.
I'm just saying
the fact that I just get a bad vibe.
There are plenty of red flags with Aaron Rodgers. I don't know that hanging out with Miles Teller, star of Project X, cracks the top 10. And no, I don't know any other movies Miles Teller's in. You've
never seen
Shailene Woodley movie.
You've never seen what?
Whiplash? I have not.
It's a great movie.
Okay.
Oh, you should see that.
I haven't seen it.
It's a great movie. Miles Teller. I forget who the supporting actor in the movie won Best Supporting Actor in the Oscars. That was a great movie. You should watch that. Shailene Woodley was Divergent. The books that weren't the Hunger Games. She's basically knockoff Jennifer Lawrence.
I basically watch.
That's who she is.
3 kinds of movies. I watch absurd comedies, so like Seth Rogen, Will Ferrell, Adam Sandler movies. I watch mob movies, so The Departed, Goodfellas, and I watch Star Wars. That's it.
There you go.
That's pretty much the extent of what I watch.
I've never seen Divergent, but all I know is that Shailene Woodley is basically knockoff Jennifer Lawrence. Like she's the other teenage, comic book girl or whatever you want to call it. So that's her. Go watch Whiplash though. That's a great movie. That's the one.
I'll put it on my list.
That's the one thing I will give Miles Teller is that was a fantastic movie. But on that note, yes. Alex and I will be back on the show.
This was fun though. We should do more of this.
Absolutely. Alex and I will be back on the pod on Tuesday. Maybe we'll do the Q&A on Tuesday and then do some OTA stuff on Thursday or vice versa or something like that. But we're going to have plenty more Patriots coverage coming up. This is a fun time of year for the Patriots and for NFL in general with OTAs. Basically, it's all hype right now. So we get to just have some fun and think about things that matter way too much that don't matter at all, right? Like OTA practices and who's taking reps where in the middle of June or late May or whatever. But we'll be back on Tuesday on the pod and Thursday of next week as well. And hopefully back out at training camp and OTAs next week. And then mandatory mini camp June 14th through the 16th, I believe it is. And then we go back into the true dead period of the NFL offseason between mini camp and the start of training camp at the end of July. But that's a little bit farther away. So we'll be back on Tuesday. More OTA talk, more questions about Whiplash and Miles Teller and Aaron Rodgers as well. So we'll see you guys then. Thanks for hanging out, everyone.